So when I started my university studies many, many years ago, I had a professor named Dan Jones. Now, he was the founder of Dan Jones and Associates, and in recent years passed away, but he was a pollster, and that's what he had done for years. He had a PhD as well, focusing on survey research. And one thing he always told his students, he said, those who live by the polls die by the polls, which is the reason why personally, while I do talk about polls, I talk about the problems with polls, because polls do have a lot of problems. You cannot take them as concrete evidence of something going one way or the other. And today's video, we're going to look at one poll in my 30 plus years of doing this is about one of the worst polls that I've ever seen in my life. That is the Atlas Insight poll. So we're going to delve into that and show why it's so bad. But for coming attractions, let me go ahead and show you this to just give you an idea why this poll is not necessarily the most reliable. So we're going to go into that poll. We're also going to go a little bit into the Telemundo CNBC poll because there are some discrepancies in that one, but overall it looks okay. There are some worrying trends that we have that one for Democrats. But before we get into the polls, there's a few things I want to talk about. The first thing is if you are voting by mail, just want to show you these states have now sent out their ballots, their vote by mail ballots. Now, if you see a state that is red, but you have a ballot, please remark down below. Go ahead and tell me, because there are some states that don't have a set law. They just send them out. So if you live in a state like Tennessee, for example, or Nevada that doesn't have a specific law, please let me know if you've received a ballot down below. That's the first thing. And here are the early voting states. In-person early voting, as you can see, we don't have many of those. And the second thing is, yesterday I announced a GoFundMe for a poll that we're going to do with St. Pete Polls about the 13th Congressional District in Florida. We are almost already at our fundraising goals, so if you please go to the link below and contribute, we can go ahead and fill this up and start getting the poll ready right away. Thank you for all of those who have already contributed. It means a lot to me. Thank you very much. And if this poll goes well, which I think it will, we might look at doing one for the U.S. Senate race in Florida closer to Election Day. So please go ahead, contribute $5, $10, $15, whatever, that works out. So let's go ahead and start off with looking at the Telemundo CNBC poll, and we're just going to look at a little bit of data, just very, very little data. So let's go ahead and look at the top line horse race. Here we see of the 1,000 registered, and that's important, registered voters, not likely voters, Latino voters, and they use mixed methods, so they use online, cell phones, and text. We have a margin of error of 3.1%. We see that Kamala Harris is up 54 to 40 in this poll. Now, the main discrepancy that I want to talk about is heritage. So they ask people where their families are from originally, where you trace your roots to. Now, this Mexico and Puerto Rico number seem about right where they should be, but that Spain number is extremely high at 11%. According to the 2020 census and the estimates that we have right now for 2022, I believe that I saw, that number should be 2.5%, not 11%. So that is a big, big discrepancy when we look at that number. Now, personally, I don't know if that would shift the poll more conservative or more liberal, but that number is definitely an outlier. Overall, if we look at the poll as far as most important issues, and this is something I really wanted to focus on, as you can see amongst Latino voters, 34% say that cost of living is most important, with jobs in the economy being 20%. Democracy, or in this case, threats to democracy, is at 16%, with immigration at 11%. Now, this goes to the point that I say Democrats need to get their head out of, because Democrats are really, really bad at this. Voters are nuanced. Voters, all these groups that we talk about, they have homes, they have jobs, they have apartments, they have kids going to school. They might be getting education themselves. They buy eggs and bacon and stuff like that. They have normal lives. They have car payments to make. For us to categorize that, Hispanic voters, immigration, women voters, abortion, that is a dumb way to look at elections. If Democrats came to this point, and I think that they have with the Harris campaign, I think they've done a really good job. When you come to this overall message of I hate to say change and hope, but change and hope, instead of being like this segment, putting these people in their little silos and saying we're going to focus on this one issue in this little silo, that has been a big problem for Democrats throughout the years. All right, so now let's go into this Atlas Insight poll. Now, one thing that people keep on putting down in the comments, which I don't know why, is talking about how Trump was underestimated in the votes when he ran. Well, Barack Obama was underestimated in 2012 when he ran. They said it was going to be very close, and the actual number was higher than they expected. So it can happen either way. And also, numbers aren't focused on turnout. So this is just a poll. What matters if people turn out to vote to make that poll a reality. So remember, register to vote, go ahead and vote, make sure your vote is counted, vote, vote, vote. That being the case, I went ahead and looked into this Insight poll, and pretty much it's an outlier. So a few weeks or maybe a week ago, they did a poll showing Donald Trump up 3% nationally in a head-to-head race. Now, this might not seem kind of odd, but it's actually pretty much of an outlier. So the only other poll that shows nationally Donald Trump leading by 3% in the last 2 months are Rasmussen polls, right? So we're talking about Atlas Insight being within the same realm of Rasmussen. So that's not exactly the best category to be in if you want to be seen as unbiased. All right, and just before we continue, if you made it this far so far, please go ahead, subscribe to the channel. A large number of you who do come here and watch aren't subscribed. We are close to the 10,000 mark, and please hit the bell so that you are notified about what goes on here. So if you like the numbers and what I do, please subscribe to the channel. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue. So before we get into the crosstabs, let's talk about this polling firm and their methodology. So the polling firm is from Brazil, and for some reason they do the whole entire world, and we'll get into why that probably is. So they do polls in Turkey, they do polls in France, obviously Brazil, where they're from, Chile, the United States. It's like they're all over the place when it comes to their polling firm, which I've never seen a polling firm this so scattered all over the place as this polling firm. It's to the point of it's kind of suspicious. Now, I looked into their methodology and the way they do things, and they do something called, random digital recruitment. This is the way in which they get their people. So what is this method? Basically, it's an opt-in poll. That means it's not a random sample of people that each person who is likely going to be voting in the election has an equal opportunity to be chosen for the poll. No, basically what this company does is they put an ad on a website, or they put an ad somewhere, and we don't even know where they put the ad. So, I mean, if you put an ad on Facebook, you're going to get older voters. If you put an ad on TikTok, you're going to get younger voters, right? So we don't know where they run these ads, but basically they run ads, and then they have people opt into the poll, and then they poll from that pool they have of people who have opted in, okay? So this is the method that they do. So you have to opt in to this poll. Now, there are a few problems with this approach. The first problem is we can't confirm if any of these are actually really voters, right? So we don't know if somebody opts in purely with an email address, if they're not verifying it with voter registration rolls or anything like that, which they don't indicate that they do, well, then that is, that's an issue. We don't know if these people are actually voters. This is the reason why they put likely voters and they can't put registered voters. When you have a poll that only talks about likely voters and doesn't go from registered voters to likely voters, they can only talk about likely voters, big red flag. Absolutely big red flag. Now, the second thing is, of course, you have the problem of it not being randomized, that people can just opt into the poll. And again, that can be determined by where those ads are run. And the third part, and this can be even more disturbing, is that if you have a VPN, so let's say I'm in Mozambique and I'm watching Netflix and I have the US VPN on so that I can watch Netflix in the United States, I could get this ad pop up and then all of a sudden be included in polls. So VPNs actually become a really big problem when we talk about these only online polls. And the fourth thing I want to talk about is weighing. They don't mention any ways that they weigh their sample whatsoever. And I think this is because they are purely just picking people, getting the numbers, spitting them out there, not even really doing any type of methodology to what they did. Now, they did do a video about this poll, and I want to show you some clips from the video that they did, because I think they're kind of interesting in telling. So this is the first one that I want to show you.
The true swing states of this election. I am a bit in doubt about Minnesota, actually. I'm also a bit in doubt about Virginia. I think they're still lean Democrat, but I think that in our next round of swing state polls, we should probably include them. For now, we're just going to adhere to the current consensus that.
So I find this interesting. So this person who's the CEO of this company says he's in doubt about Minnesota and Virginia, yet is not basing that doubt out of any polls that his company has done. This is just purely interjecting your opinion in this idea. And this is when polling companies start, they start having a problem. When you start saying, I think this is this and I think this is this. No, let the data say what it says and then let that inform your opinion. So this is a big one. Now, the second one is an issue in another real red flag issue. So let's go ahead and look at this next video.
Actually, in all of Georgia, Arizona, and Wisconsin, we're going to see Trump is slightly ahead, but less than 2 percentage points ahead. And the margin of error for these polls is 3 percentage points. If you're saying that Trump is ahead by 1 point, and in some cases by less than 1, essentially we're not saying that is an advantage that you can.
So the fact that they're a polling firm and don't know how margin of error works is really, really kind of scary, and it's really deceiving as well. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what Pew Research has on their website to give you an idea what margin of error is, because it seems like there is sometimes some confusion. So if we look here, we can see on the left, they talk about a poll with a margin of error of 3% for candidates. So if you see the Democrat at 43%, that means their percentage can go up to 46, or their percentage can go down to 40. So you have these upper and lower bounds. You see it also with the Republicans. So at worst, for the Democrat, they could be losing 40 to 51 to the Republican. At best, the Democrat could be up by 46 to 45. So you can see you have these bounds. Now, if you look at the margin of errors of all of the polls that have been done by this Atlas Insight, you can see that every single one of them, if you include the margin of error, would put Kamala Harris over 50%. So therefore, how can they even say that any of these are tilting Republican or tilting Democrat even, if the margin of error can put Kamala Harris, and in that case, Donald Trump, over 50% in each one? It seems like they don't have a fundamental understanding as to how margin of error works, which again is really concerning for a polling firm who's supposed to be doing this as a living. So this is a big problem. Let's go ahead and go into the crosstabs for the state and look at the wacky, crazy stuff that we're going to see in this poll. So the first poll we're going to look at the Arizona poll. So let's go ahead and look at that. And as you can see, within the margin of error, 3.0%, they have Kamala Harris down by 50 to 49. Now this is where the craziness comes. According to this poll, Kamala Harris is winning male voters by 12%. Okay, and on top of that as well, it shows that Kamala Harris is also losing female voters by 11%. And even though they're a smaller percentage of the population, it shows that Donald Trump is winning 40% of the black vote. Okay, so these crosstabs are absolutely bonkers. They're not even nearly in the categories that we expect them, especially that 40% black voters for Arizona. That's absolutely nuts. So let's go ahead and go to the next state, which is Georgia. Okay, so if we look at Georgia, we see it's split 49-49 between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. If we look at male voters, you can see he's up 52 to 45, which makes sense. And then if you flip it back to women voters, you see 52 to 48. Now, again, we see black voters with 22% of the vote. I believe in the last exit poll, they had about 8% of the vote. And when you're talking about a state like Georgia, where the black population is a significant more amount of the vote than other places, that skews the results in Donald Trump's favor. But however, what's interesting is amongst white voters, even though it's a little bit different, Kamala Harris is down 34 to 62. That 62 number is actually a little bit less than we expect in any of the polls that we see with Georgia. Now let's go ahead and look at the Michigan poll, and we can see that Donald Trump is up 50-47 in this poll. Now, in this one, I decided to look at the party breakdown of who they had their respondents be, and they're totally off what the exit poll is, favoring the Republicans in this case. So you can see 38% of their poll is other, whereas they were only 23% of the electorate. As for the Democrats, only 29% of their poll are Democrats, though 38% of the electorate identified as Democrats, and the Republican number is a little bit off, but not as much as the Democratic number. This would totally skew the poll in the Republican direction. Now, if we look at male voters, we see again, Kamala Harris is winning male voters, which is just kind of weird. And then we look at female voters in Michigan, and all of a sudden, Donald Trump is winning female voters. Again, kind of weird. And if we look at the black voters, we can see Kamala Harris is winning 770-23. This would also be like a 200 to 300% increase for the black voters for Donald Trump, which is an anomaly we're not seeing really anywhere. So as you can see in these polls, we see a lot of male and female voters like absolutely flipped from what we would normally see them in other polls. So let's go ahead and go to the Nevada poll. Okay, so we look at Nevada, and I see that I have the wrong abbreviation. It should be NV. That's Nebraska. We can see Kamala Harris is up 51-48. This number should be a little bit more for Kamala Harris, but it's not too far off. That's okay. Again, Donald Trump with 26% of black voters, but in Nevada in the last exit poll, that number was 18%. But still, that's a 9% increase. And also a non-insignificant number of voters are Asian voters, with Kamala Harris winning 53-47, which again is significantly smaller than what we've seen the exit polls say in the past. So overall, in North Carolina, we can see Kamala Harris is up 51-47. Now, this is another one where I looked at the party breakdown, and we can see that the breakdown in party, that in their poll, the plurality of voters they have are other political parties or minor parties. That's what they identify as, whereas they are the lowest number when we look at the exit poll in 2020. So that just seems kind of odd. Again, we have Kamala Harris winning amongst male voters in North Carolina, which just makes no sense, but then losing female voters as well. Donald Trump is barely ahead when it comes to white voters in North Carolina. He should be up, 62-63% Donald Trump should have in this category of voters. Now, of course, independent voters were the largest number of voters that we saw in that group, and they're at 59-37% in this poll. So let's look at Pennsylvania, our final one. This one's the funniest one. It has Donald Trump up 51-48. Again, you have Donald Trump winning male voters by 1%, which is interesting. He's finally winning them. But of course, he's dominating with female voters over Kamala Harris, which just doesn't make sense. Now, this last one is the funniest of them all because it shows Kamala Harris only winning 53% of the black vote in Pennsylvania and 47% going toward Donald Trump. Now, when we're talking about black voters in Pennsylvania, we're talking about around 11% of the electorate. If 11% of the electorate is that lopsided, and then this company says, oh, that's a number, oh, it shows that Trump is winning Pennsylvania, you can't trust that number. You can't trust it at all. And this is the problem with this poll. They're showing that Donald Trump's winning female voters, that Kamala Harris is winning male voters. They're showing the black vote significantly higher. And in the cases of Arizona and in Pennsylvania that we had, being up quite at a comical amount, to be quite honest. If we look at the Nevada poll, it shows, 4% of Hispanic voters. And in Nevada, they're pretty, significant, like 4% going for Jill Stein, right? This is the biggest garbage poll that I have ever seen in my life. So I just wanted to show you these numbers. Take them with a grain of salt. It is a bad poll. So when Republicans are pushing this electoral map in this poll, just so you know, it's crap. It's garbage. Okay. So thank you all very much. We're going to go ahead and take apart some more of these polls, but we are getting closer to Election Day, and tomorrow, October 1st, is a very, very special day. Go ahead and comment below and see if you know why. I'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye.